Hello, everyone. Welcome. It's great to see you today for the webinar that we have for you. My name's Janet Anderson. I'm the Commissioner of the Aged Care Quality and Safety Commission. And I'll start by acknowledging the traditional owners of the lands on which we're meeting around Australia and paying my respects to Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander elders, past, present and emerging. And indeed to any Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders who are with us today for this webinar. Thursday, the 1st of December, was a key milestone in aged care reform in this country, which introduced a number of new arrangements in aged care. And in the lead up to the 1st of December, we held a number of webinars with the sector, possibly with you, which focused on key aged care reforms that now apply. And our aim has always been to discuss the reforms, the new requirements that apply to providers, and to help you prepare. Today is our last webinar in the series for 2022. And what we're going to do is to take stock of where we are in the current reforms and talk about some of those yet to come. But in fact, what I'd like to do is to start briefly by referring to COVID-19, which of course is still with us. And it would be remiss of me not to mention that earlier this week, on Tuesday, in fact, the Minister released a national statement of expectations on COVID-19 management in aged care settings. And if you've not seen it yet, I commend it to you. Please Google it, find it, have a quick read through it. None of it will be surprising. All of it should be familiar, but it does reinforce the need for vigilance, particularly over the holiday period, in relation to IPC measures and taking suitable precautions to keep aged care consumers, staff and visitors safe. Please read it. I know it's a busy time of year, but it really is important that you as the providers are paying close attention to this important priority. So what are we going to cover today? As I said, 1st of December was Go Live Day for a number of key reforms. And in the lead up to the 1st of December, we published a range of information, targeted materials, resources and guidance. Today, I'm going to be joined by two colleagues in the Commission, Lisa Peterson, who's the Assistant Commissioner of Sector Capability, who's going to talk with us about those resources that we've published. And she's also going to give an update on the revised quality standards, which have been the subject of consultation. Anthony Speed, who's the Executive Director of Quality Assessment Monitoring, will then talk to us about the Commission's new regulatory powers, the way in which we will regulate the new reform initiatives that have been introduced. Thank you to everyone who submitted questions in advance of the webinar. You do have the opportunity of submitting questions during the webinar, and I please encourage you to take full advantage of that. We will have time at the end to go through some of those questions, and any that we don't address, we will of course respond to on our website through a Q&A function there. So please keep an eye out on the website, not just for the questions and answers that we will publish, but also for a recording of this session. Now, before I invite Lisa to join us, I want to touch briefly on what exactly the reforms were that came into place on the 1st of December. And the first I want to talk about is the Code of Conduct. Now, I am assuming you have all familiarised yourself with these new provisions because they do apply to you and have done so since the 1st. The ambition or the aim of the code is to improve the safety, health, well-being and quality of life for all people receiving aged care and to boost trust and confidence in aged care services. We published draft guidance for providers in early October and for workers in early November, and indeed the final guidance, which needed to await the subordinate legislation, is now available. And I do hope you've had a look at it. We're getting some really positive feedback for those who are now using it. The guidance details the 8 elements of the code, who the code applies to, and also provides case studies of real-life experiences. Remember that providers are now required to take reasonable steps to ensure their workers and governing persons comply with the code. Now, we are overseeing and indeed have responsibility for overseeing compliance with the code. And if we find that an aged care provider or governing person or an aged care worker has behaved in a way that's inconsistent with the code, we will take action. And that might involve working with the provider to resolve complaints about conduct that's inconsistent with the code. And in certain cases, we may even undertake an investigation if the conduct is more serious. Now, in the most serious cases of poor conduct, or where individuals are found to be unsuitable to work in aged care, we could issue a banning order. I don't expect it will happen terribly often, but it is a power that the Commission now has, and that banning order can stop or restrict a person, either permanently or for a specified period, from engaging in, providing or being involved in the provision of aged care. Now, we have a register page of banning orders on our website, at which you can find by Googling it. And that page also contains information about the banning orders and procedural fairness. And when we make a banning order, we have not yet made any, they will also be published on that page in the register. Now I'm going to move to the second reform I want to talk about, and that is the extension of serious incident response scheme to home services. Now, the providers in scope for this extension are home care, but providers of home care packages, short-term restorative care at home, Commonwealth Home Support Program services, National Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander Flexible Aged Care services, multi-purpose services, and transition care program services. Now, home service providers will undoubtedly have studied the new requirements and already be implementing them. The SIRS sets out the arrangements that providers of aged care adhere to in managing and taking reasonable steps to prevent incidents, with a focus on the safety, health, wellbeing, and quality of life of consumers. And these SIRS requirements are entirely consistent with the very familiar aged care quality standards, and particularly Standard 8, organisational governance. Details of the SIRS requirements, if you haven't done all your reading and preparation yet, and you might be running a bit late, those details are available in our guidance resources that Lisa will also talk about. Some of the early insights, because the 1st of December was now a week or so back, even in that short space of time, we have started to receive notifications from home service providers. So well done you for understanding your obligations and fulfilling them. Now, a small proportion of the reports that we've received to date actually don't fall within the scope of SIRS. That's entirely expected. The same thing happened when SIRS was introduced in residential services. So what we've done is provided clarification to those providers as to what is in scope and what they might record in their incident management system, but is not in scope for reporting to the Commission as a serious incident in one of the 8 categories. And we do want home services providers to understand and keep in mind that reportable incidents are those which align with one of the 8 reportable incident categories and which occur in connection with the provision of care and services to consumers. And of course, providers must also report suspicions or allegations about serious incidents. So moving on to the third of the reforms I want to talk about, the additional obligations now applying to providers in relation to governance. And particularly in relation to aspects of the operations of the governing body. Our guidance material on our website provides details of these new requirements, who they apply to and from when. From most providers, all of those who were providing services as approved providers before the 1st of December, the majority of the requirements take effect from the 1st of December 2023, so in just under a year's time. But there are in fact 3 requirements that apply now, right now, to all approved providers, regardless of when you started delivering services. And these are those. 1, assessing the suitability of key personnel at least once a year. 2, notifying the Commission of changes that materially impact the provider's suitability and any changes to key personnel within 14 days of that change. And 3, providing annual information on your operations to the Department of Health and Aged Care. So there are 3 specific provisions which are already in play from the beginning of December. And now a new notification form is available on our website. to support you in adhering to those new requirements, and you can find it on our approved provider page. Other reforms which for most providers come into effect, as I said, from 1st of December next year, 2023, include requirements relating to the composition of your governing body, the establishment of advisory bodies, skills and qualification of staff, ensuring that wholly owned subsidiaries review their constitution to identify conflict of interest, and ensuring that key personnel of providers, which are corporations, notify the provider if their circumstances related to the suitability matters under the legislation change. Now, providers who've applied for approval to be a provider on or after the 1st of December are required to meet all the requirements from the date they are approved. So there's that will be in coming weeks or months at the outside, but certainly not next December. So for those of you who may be thinking that you have a year to get yourself sorted on these various obligations, I just indicated to you that there are at least 3 which apply right now. And in terms of the balance, my strong recommendation is you have a look at the extent to which you are currently compliant and you start in the direction of compliance. And indeed, there's no harm in getting there in advance of the requirement for 1st of December 2023. Now, the last in this sequence of 4 is the changes in the clarification of consent provisions for restrictive practices. The quality of care principles have been amended to include a hierarchy of persons who can consent to the use of restrictive practices on a care recipient's behalf when that individual is not able to consent on their own behalf. So it can only be used when the consumer cannot consent themselves, where a mechanism under state and territory law to appoint a restrictive practices substitute decision maker is not available, and a substitute decision maker has not been appointed. Now, importantly, all the other existing requirements relating to the use of restrictive practices continue to apply. This does not supplant all of those other obligations which continue to exist in the quality of care principles, including that you must have a behaviour support plan in place, that restrictive practices must be a last resort with everything else tried before you get there, that it should be used for the least possible time, that it is subject to supervision and review. All of those requirements still apply and they are not swept away. So I just wanted to make that point really clear. The new consent provisions are an interim measure. They are only in place until the 1st of December 2024, which gives states and territories enough time to amend their consent and guardianship laws to cover these consent requirements. Now, a fact sheet on consent requirements for the use of restrictive practices in residential care is actually available on the Department of Health and Aged Care's website, and we will be providing resources on this in coming weeks. Now, there is a bigger picture of reform, and I won't spend long on this, but of course the bigger picture is the new Aged Care Act, which has been recommended by the Royal Commission and is currently under development. Now, the drafting of that act is something that the Department of Health and Aged Care has responsibility for, and there will be and indeed there is already the beginnings of a consultation process about various components of that act. And once the exposure draft is ready of the bill, I understand that will be the subject of public consultation. So there will be an opportunity for input on the draft before it gets before Parliament. And indeed, that consultation will also take into account the views of the existing consultative and advisory bodies, such as the Council of Elders and the National Aged Care Advisory Council, and indeed the National Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander Ageing and Aged Care Council. There have also been other amendments made recently in law that you would also be aware of, which have not yet come into being, but they are the requirement for every residential service to have a registered nurse on site and on duty 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. That's planned to commence on the 1st of July 2023. There will be, from the 1st of January, a capping of administrative charges and the banning of exit fees for in-home care packages. And there's also another provision which has been passed into law in relation to improving the transparency and accountability of residential aged care services through reporting requirements to government. Now, a lot of the fine detail which attaches to each of those measures will come through when the subordinate legislation, the rules, if you like, are clarified and finalised. So please keep an eye on our website, on our reforms page, and we will do our very best to keep you updated on that. Okay. The capping, if I can just go to that very briefly, the capping of admin and management charges, which commences on the 1st of January. Now, the caps target excessive charging to ensure more funds are available to meet the direct needs of care recipients. So from 1 January 2023, for any package level in a home care package, the amount a provider can charge for care management will be capped at 20% of the package. The amount able to be charged for package management will be capped at 15% of the package. Now, I know this is a lot of detail, and I'm not going to go into a lot more detail here because I would direct you to look at the resources which are already available and have been published on this, particularly by the Department of Health and Aged Care. If you are a home care provider listening to this webinar and you are unaware of this provision, then you really need to make it your business to do a number of things before we get to the 1st of January. You need to ensure that your charges are below the legislated caps for care management and package management. You need to stop charging separately for exit amounts and third-party services if you currently do. And you must update your prices on My Aged Care and all documentation to reflect those changes. So you have until the 1st of January to do that work. And if you haven't started, then please understand what you need to do and get moving on it. The other one I want to mention briefly before I go to my colleague is star ratings. Now, the residential aged care services have actually received a review star rating that they are engaging with now and looking at and trying to understand for themselves. These star ratings are expected to be published in the week beginning the 19th of December 2022. And aged care homes receive an overall star rating and 4 subcategory ratings across compliance, residents' experience, staffing, and quality measures. Now, these star ratings are absolutely an important accountability and transparency improvement for the aged care sector. They were recommended by the Royal Commission, and the government is really keen to enable them to be published so that they can be available for consumers and prospective consumers to ask questions about them. Now, the Commission has received some contact from providers who have questions, legitimate questions, about their previewed star rating and the contribution that is made to that star rating by the compliance rating. And I can say that as a result of those questions, and well done, we have identified a data issue which may be impacting on the calculation of the compliance rating feeding into the star rating. We're looking at it, working urgently on it, and we hope to see whether there are adjustments possible in the next 48 hours. So if you are in that category, I can assure you we're looking at something that might be amiss in the calculations, and if there is something that needs to be fixed, we will fix it. But I would also commend to you the contact details which have already been provided to you about compliance issues. Clearly, you know where to find us because we've already had some calls from providers. But if you have a question about one of the other 3 contributors to the calculation of star ratings, then your contact is different. Your contact is the Department of Health and Aged Care. And I know that that information has been provided to you, but I'll just read out that number if you want to jot it down. 1800 836 799. But that is information which I understand has already been provided to you. Now, let me stop at that point because that's a lot that I have just imparted to you. I'd now like to invite Lisa Peterson, the Assistant Commissioner, Sector Capability, to talk about the work that the Commission has done on producing resources in order to support the sector to get ready for these reforms, and also to give us an update on the revision of the quality standards. Thanks, Lisa.
Thanks very much, Janet, and hi everybody, and thank you for joining us here this afternoon. So two things that I'm going to cover off today. Firstly, to talk about the resources that are now available on the 1 December reforms, and secondly, to give you a bit of an update on the strength and quality standards. So Janet's given us a great overview of the 1 December reforms, and as you've just heard, there's a lot of detail that sits under each of the reform areas, so quite a lot of content to come to grips with. So to support you in doing that, we've developed some really comprehensive resources on the code, on provider governance and SIRS in home services. And all of these resources are now available on our website, and they'll detail for you the new requirements and the obligations for both providers and workers, and with a range of case studies and different resource types. So our aged care reforms webpage is a really good place to start, and you can find there the recordings and slides and Q&A from our reform webinar series. And that page will also take you to a specific page for each of the different areas of reform. So example, one for code, one for SIRS and so on, which picks up the whole suite of guidance and educational resources. So there's loads that's available there to support you, but we really want to help you understand what they are and know how to locate them. So to assist you for today's webinar, we've produced 3 different sets of documents which provide a detailed listing and links to each of the resources that I'm going to tell you about today. And you can download these you should be able to see a blue arrow on the right hand side of your browser in this screen. If you click on that blue arrow, what should appear are 3 links for documents, and each of those list all the available resources for the reform. So click on the link to download the resource, and you can do that at any time during the webinar. If that's too complicated, don't worry. As I said, you can find it all on our website. You'll see that we've produced separate resources for both residential and home care where that makes sense. And we've also focused on producing different content for providers and workers and consumers. And we know that these can be very different audiences with distinct information needs. I do want to say thank you to the people in the sector. In preparing our resources, we were able to test our ideas and some of our products with a range of people who receive aged care, as well as a number of providers. So thank you to everybody that provided that feedback, incredibly helpful to us. We do ask you to please, for your help in sharing the consumer resources that are available with the people that you care for and their families, and that will help consumers to understand what these reforms mean for them and what they can expect. So thanks for your help with that. Let me start with the Code of Conduct, and firstly with the resources that we have, particularly for providers. So we've got an approved readiness checklist. We've got a Know Your Code learning module, and this is available in our free aged care learning information system, Alice. We've got a fact sheet, which gives a nice short, sharp summary. We've got a video and also an anonymous self-assessment quiz that people can undertake to check their own readiness. And providers can also access the Code of Conduct for aged care webinar recording and slides. For workers, we've got a guidance document, a video, the Know Your Code free learning module, fact sheets, quick guides and posters. And for consumers, we have videos, fact sheets, again, reference guide, posters and guidance. And as I mentioned, we'd love it if you can make these available at your service. We are working on translations and easy English versions of selected worker and consumer resources, and they'll be coming soon. Moving on now to SIRS in home cares. So again, for SIRS in home services, we've got provider and worker resources, which include 12 free online learning modules on the platform. So they cover a range of topics. Creating an incident management system. We've got something on complaints in your incident management system. We've got one on unlawful sexual contact or inappropriate sexual conduct, and one on inappropriate use of restrictive practices. So that's just a sample of, that's 4 of the 12 that are available. We've also got, and we know this was really popular with our resi providers, we have for both providers and workers the SIRS Decision Support online tool and a range of fact sheets that go over the 8 different types of reportable incidents. Really important that consumers understand what SIRS means for them. So we've got some specific SIRS resources for consumers, including videos, posters and fact sheets. So what is SIRS? Understanding your right to be safe. What does this mean for your care and services, and how to make a complaint? For provider governance, again, quite a number of things. So we have fact sheets on notifying the Commission of certain matters and your obligations there, fact sheets around considering the suitability of key personnel. We've got a quick reference poster, which is a really handy guide to understanding all the different things and when they apply, and also a video. We've got some fact sheets that are for workers, and we're also continuing to work on additional resources which we're going to be releasing over the next month. So we've got some code of conduct case studies coming. We've got a Your Role in SIRS web tools, which we'll be very excited to introduce to you, which provides some really simple language guidance and tools for aged care workers and managers. And we've got more online learning modules coming on reportable incidents and reporting to the Commission, as well as an Alice module on strengthening provider governance. I also just want to give a mention to our Governing for Reform program. So we're very excited. We now have over 3,500 enrolments in the Governing for Reform in Aged Care program. And that program is supporting leaders across the sector to understand and engage with the reforms. And we just last week launched a new online learning module called the Reform Journey Ahead. And this module unpacks all of the key elements and the shifts that are required under the reforms and really spell out very clearly the role for executives and governing bodies in that process. The Governing for Reform program's also recently put out a new For the Board kit, and that's available to everybody. So you don't have to be participating in the program to get hold of that. It's really handy. There are 12 discussion papers to around the board table. And of course, you can also listen to the program's podcast series from your favourite podcast platforms, so Spotify, Google or Apple, just by searching for Governing for Reform in Aged Care. Now, we're going to keep it, Janet also mentioned, a number of things that are coming our way, kicking off in January and early next year, and we'll continue to add to our resources. So really encourage people to stay up to date by regularly visiting our aged care website reform page. And we'll also continue, as we bring new resources online, we promote them through our quality bulletin and also through social media. So if you aren't following us, please do. That'll help you stay up to date. We would love your feedback on the resources. We'd love to know what hits the mark and what doesn't, and let us know if there are gaps, so things that are missing that could support you. So please do send any feedback that you might have through to aged care reforms, all one word, at agecarequality, all one word, .gov.au. So that's the resource piece. I wanted to move on now to talk to you about the review of the aged care quality standards that's underway. So I'm sure that everybody will be aware that in response to the Royal Commission into Aged Care and Quality and Safety, one of the recommendations that came out of that was for an urgent review of the aged care quality standards, which was picked up by government and with an intention that a report be provided back to government by the end of this year on how the standards could be strengthened. The Department of Health and Aged Care is leading that review, but working in very close collaboration with us here at the Commission and also with the Australian Commission on Safety and Quality in Healthcare. And they have responsibility for drafting the standards relating to clinical care. So the review process aims to address the issues identified by the Royal Commission. So what the Royal Commission said we needed to look at was having greater specificity and measurability of requirements under the standards, and also a stronger focus on food and nutrition, diversity, governance, dementia and clinical care. So consultations on how to strengthen the standards started back almost a year ago, actually exactly a year ago, December 2021, and a strengthened version of the quality standards has now been developed. So that's been released for public comment, and you can find them at the link that's shown on the screen. So following the release of that draft, the department led some further public consultation activity over October and November to test these strengthened standards and to get feedback from the sector on where improvements could be made. And that included getting an understanding from the sector on what support would best assist you in terms of implementation. So there's been a great process which has given us some really terrific engagement with providers and workers and peaks and older people and members of the public, and they've engaged in this process through surveys and focus groups and written submissions to the department. So all of that feedback is now being considered, and that will inform any further changes to the strengthened quality standards, and they will then be considered by government. So the final content and the timing of the quality standards will be subject to a government decision. And at this stage, we think we're expecting that to be aligned with the work on the new Aged Care Act. So there is a very significant body of work ahead for all of us to prepare for the strengthened standards. And I very much appreciate this sounds like another hill to climb given all the changes that are already underway. And I guess that's the challenge for all of us in aged care. It's going to continue to be a hilly terrain, and we need to have that as part of our mindset. So with that in mind, we do really hope that you'll approach the strengthened standards as an opportunity. The intent behind this work is to support and to drive an excellent aged care experience that our older Australians expect and deserve, and I know that's a goal that we share with you. And the new standards will also help us to better understand and reflect how we at the Commission see performance across the sector. It will provide us with a more nuanced approach that also builds in recognition where we see excellent care, and we know that that's important. So we're working really closely with the department on our planning, and we'll have more to share with you about that in early 2023. But there's a couple of key messages that I can share now. The first thing I want to say is that this is a journey that we're going on together. The Commission, the department, providers and consumers. And our aim is to play our part as well as we can in supporting the sector to be ready. So that means making sure that everyone understands what's ahead, that you know what to expect from us as our role as the regulator, that you've got the right tools and the content to understand your obligations and how you can best evidence your performance in relation to the standards. And these changes to the standards also mean that we at the Commission need to think differently about what we do and how we do it. So we're already starting to turn our minds to how we implement and regulate the strengthened standards. And a key task for us is to consider what these changes are going to mean for our audit methodology. And by that, I mean our process for assessing performance against the standards. So an early part of our work will be to have a look at the changes that we might need to make to our audit methodology, and then we'll test that through a pilot program involving a small number of providers across all the different service types. The next step will be to take on board the learnings from that pilot program and then to take our methodology out to test with the sector more broadly. We know that it's absolutely vital that we work really closely with providers so that we land a practical and transparent approach that takes account of how you can most effectively use your own systems and business processes to evidence performance. And we also want to engage really closely with both providers and people who receive care around the information and education tools that you'll need to be prepared for the strengthened standard and to get your input on the design and content. And of course, we will be running a very extensive education program to support the sector. So that's just a quick taste of what's to come, and I'm really looking forward to sharing more with you early in the new year. Thanks very much, Janet.
Oh, thank you, Lisa. Again, a fair amount of ground covered in a relatively short space of time. One of the points Lisa made was the value that the Commission places on your feedback, and she meant it. We really do benefit from any feedback you can give us on our guidance documents, other resources that we're producing, even today's webinar. If you would like to give us feedback, we are all ears. And indeed, there is a survey available to you right now or at the end of the webinar. You can find it at the yellow speech bubble icon in the top right corner of your screen. But please, if you wouldn't mind taking a moment at the end of the webinar to complete that, we do benefit from hearing directly from you. And keep the questions coming. We've already had a number of really thoughtful ones. I do hope we have some time to get to at least a few of them before we close. But before then, we have another speaker, Anthony Speed, an executive director in the Commission. And Anthony's going to talk to us about the Commission's regulatory approach to the reforms we've been discussing. Anthony.
Thanks, Janet. And good afternoon, everyone. It is, as Janet and Lisa have outlined, a busy reform environment we're in, and I'm going to talk to you today about how we're implementing the government's legislation, and particularly those new regulatory powers and the continuing assessment and monitoring responsibilities that we're continuing in the Commission. And so the introduction of the new regulatory measures has expanded our assessment and monitoring functions, where we are now undertaking additional investigations following the introduction of the Code of Conduct and of the serious incident response reporting arrangements in home services. So when the Commission receives intelligence about conduct that is inconsistent with the Code or in relation to the suitability of an individual, we will undertake a risk assessment, and that includes a review of the knowledge that we hold through our existing systems to determine our regulatory response. So where we determine that the risk requires a regulatory response, we'll consider whether the matter can be dealt with through one of our existing powers or tools, such as through an assessment of performance against the aged care quality standards, and we'll continue to monitor the risk through that process. Alternately, we might determine that there is sufficient information to indicate that there is evidence of non-compliance, and we might proceed with an investigation of conduct to determine and implement an appropriate course of action. So this can include a closure of the case at that point, where we have found that the approved provider is undertaking a reasonable response, or indeed it may inform further regulatory actions that we take. And in a smaller number of cases, as Janet mentioned earlier, we may determine that there is sufficient evidence of non-compliance to proceed immediately to a compliance and enforcement action. And our processes for conducting investigations are authorised by Commonwealth legislation, and I can assure you we strictly adhere to the Australian Government investigation standards. And these include responsibilities relating to evidence gathering, procedural fairness, and importantly, storage of evidence. Now, many of you will be familiar with our quality assessors as one of your primary contact points with the Commission, and you might be wondering how these new measures, and indeed the future regulatory environment that has been outlined today, will impact on assessment and monitoring activities. So for those measures that were introduced on 1st of December, we've been very clear with our quality assessors that their practice remains focused on assessment and monitoring of provider performance against the quality standards. And in addition to the extensive communication and education that we've heard about today that's been conducted in recent months, we've also developed resources and conducted a program of internal education opportunities for all Commission staff, including our quality assessors, to support them to understand this environment. Now, quality assessors are required to continue to conduct risk escalations where they find evidence of immediate risk to consumers, and they have been advised to refer any matters to the investigations intake team where they consider that there is evidence of risk in relation to the Code of Conduct or a serious incident response report. We're also continuing to invest in our quality assessor workforce. We're building capabilities and we're undertaking internal activities such as we've finished a review of our quality assessment training program, which is a prerequisite for registration as a quality assessor. And we implemented a training program, which is a competency-based process, providing the tools and knowledge to apply our continuing assessment methodology. And quality assessors are required to maintain their registration through a quota of continuing professional development points. And our CPD curriculum is focused on these reforms and knowledge of these reforms, as well as targeted subject matter relevant to the quality standards, such as understanding restrictive practices. We're also preparing our assessor workforce for a future state of regulation through the same journey that all staff have taken in the Commission since we commenced in 2019. And that's included a focus on detecting and responding to the risk of consumer harm, and of applying a proportionate response where evidence is found that's based on our knowledge of the approved provider and of the response that they're taking to risk. And we've continued our focus this year on locating the consumer in the centre of our assessment methodology. And many of you will have now received a revised performance report that reflects that focus in that format. We're also applying the same continuous improvement lens to our assessment and monitoring practices that we expect to see aged care service providers apply to their own activities under the standards. So, for example, in November, we conducted a quality assurance sample of 20% of our monthly assessment and performance reports to monitor consistency of practice. And we're directing our professional development focus in response to any of those issues that were identified in that process. So, in a future regulatory environment where the assessment methodology does not require a binary interpretation of met or not met against each requirement, we can expect that there'll be an increased granularity in the findings of non-compliance. And so consequently, we might also expect a future state that would provide for increased recognition by quality assessors of good practice and innovation in the sector, and provide further opportunity to promote those practices across the sector. And I know that's a message that many of you have relayed in forums. So for the moment, this is, however, speculative, but I can foresee a future state where the scope of our practice of assessment and monitoring workforce could be extended to include recognition of high performance and an educative role, which sits alongside a continuing focus on a proportionate response to non-compliance with the quality standards where that's found. So what is certain is that the future is going to bring further change to our assessment and monitoring of performance against the standards. And we'll all remain focused on providers delivering that high quality care and services that we expect for older Australians. Thank you, Janet.
Thanks, Anthony. Another good job. We do have some time now, and we will move to questions, and it's great. Thank you to everyone who's submitted them. Keep them coming, please. I'm going to take a couple of those submitted, which won't take too long to answer. The first one from Karina. Karina, you've asked, do the restrictive practices requirements apply to home care services? And the answer is no. The requirements that I cited in the quality care principles and the new consent provisions do not apply to home care services, but there's a but. Under the extension of SIRS into home services now have a responsibility. It's just disappeared. Home services now have a responsibility to report on restrictive practices. And I want you to make sure that you check with the guidance to understand your obligations under the SIRS, please. Thank you. Now, there's another one here that I think we can address fairly readily, and it's from Jeff. And Jeff has indicated, as a provider of only Commonwealth Home Support Program funded services, my understanding is that the consideration of suitability of key personnel and the new code of conduct are not applicable. Please confirm. Well done, Jeff. Yes, you are right. Those responsibilities apply to this category of providers called approved providers, which is a recognised category under the Aged Care Act, and that excludes Commonwealth Home Support Program, Commonwealth Home Support Program providers. It's certainly for the moment. So you've understood that correctly. Thank you very much. Now let's stay with code of conduct matters briefly. And I wonder, Lisa, whether I can ask you a question which was pre-submitted. The question is, do all staff have to sign the code of conduct, and will there be a mandatory training module for workers?
Thanks very much, Janet, and great question. Look, there's no requirement under the legislation for staff to sign the code of conduct. But having said that, of course, aged care providers might have different requirements for their staff. It's possible that providers might require their staff to sign off that they will comply with the code as part of their employment relationship. So our job at the Commission is to consider a worker's compliance with the code. We don't make any decisions regarding a worker's employment contract. So essentially what we're saying is no legislative requirement to sign the code of conduct, but that might be something that your employer expects from you. In terms of mandatory training, that's not planned at this stage. And the rationale there is that the code of conduct requirements are very much consistent with the existing obligations that workers are already expected to meet. What we do, however, expect is that providers are taking reasonable steps to ensure that their workers and their governing persons comply with the code. So it's up to providers how they do that. They'll have their own ways of how they're going to inform their governing persons and their workers about the code and make sure that everybody understands and is meeting their obligations. But it is important that providers should be able to be prepared to demonstrate to the Commission the steps that they've taken in relation to ensuring that their staff and their governing persons have that understanding if we ask them for that evidence. Thanks, Janet.
Okay. Staying with the broader category of worker regulation, of which the code is the key subset, Anthony, I might direct this one to you. Will there be a database that all workers would need to be registered on, or is it only for those who have been banned?
Thanks, Janet. A worker registration database is not being introduced from 1 December this year. Instead, there will be a register of individuals who are subject to a banning order that will be published on our website. However, the government has made a commitment to introduce a registration scheme for aged care workers, and it's therefore expected to be established at some point in the future. But as we mentioned earlier, if we do have a banning orders register page on our website, and that's located under the Aged Care Performance tab on our homepage. And that page includes information about the banning orders, the register, and our procedural fairness process, importantly. The register itself will be published on this page once the Commission has made a banning order. Thanks, Janet.
Oh, thanks, Anthony. Lisa, we've had a couple of questions in relation to the strengthening provider governance provisions, and I'll ask you these ones, if I may. Somebody's come in and said, we already have a board subcommittee that reviews and has oversight of care governance. Do we need another one?
Thanks, Janet. So great question and great news that you already have that in place, which shows really good practice. So for those providers that already have an existing body in place to help ensure the quality of care in their services, we don't expect you to replace them. But what will be important is that you ensure that the bodies that you've already got in place do meet the requirements of the legislation. And there's some detail in what we call the accountability principles. So, you know, keep the group that you've already got in place, but just make sure that you're meeting all the requirements through that group. And if you're not currently meeting them, make the adjustments that you need to make. Thanks, Janet.
Okay, now the obligations that now apply to governing bodies are twofold in relation to these advisory bodies. And the first expectation is that they will have a quality care advisory committee. But the second of the expectations is that there will be this thing called a consumer advisory body. And that is subject to different provisions. And the question that's coming in is a consumer advisory body required for each service or each provider. Now, the preface to the answer, as you know, is the obligation that now applies to governing bodies is that at least annually they must offer the opportunity to their consumers to establish a consumer advisory body. But this question is, does there need to be one for each service, or would it be for a provider if that provider has more than one service?
Yeah, thanks, Janet. So that's really going to be a matter for the provider and the consumers at those services to decide. So it might be that, you know, for a large residential provider that's got multiple services. They might have so much interest in this across their different services that they decide to establish a consumer advisory body for each of the services. Or they might have a different model where they might have, one or more committees that might cover a number of services, or for a provider that perhaps got two services, they might have one. So really, as you've said, Janet, the obligation is around making the offer to care recipients and their representatives to establish the body, and making sure that's happening at least once a year. And then how you do that and put that into action is really a matter for what works in each situation.
Yeah, well answered. And I think what you're doing is underscoring the expectation that governing bodies will exercise judgment, that they will understand what works best for the consumers, what the consumers are looking for, and that they are responsive to those expectations and those preferences. I mean, that's the essence of why we are looking for this opportunity to be provided to consumers. But of course, if any providers continue to have questions, keep sending them in to us. We are more than happy to assist you in navigating your way through some of these decisions that you might need to make. Lisa, one more for you, and then I'll move to someone else. But there's another governance question, and this one is one that I've heard from others as well. Is there any intention to expand the Governing for Reform education program beyond executives and board members? And I think we've had some feedback that there's a level of interest among some other people who work in the sector.
Yeah, thanks, Janet. So firstly, as I said, we're thrilled with the level of interest in the program and the number of participants so far, and great to hear that there's interest in people accessing learning materials around organisation and clinical governance for people that are in other roles in the services. At this point, we're really actively thinking about how we can best meet that need. So thinking about what kind of education and resources are going to be most valued and most easily accessed by providers and aged care staff. So absolutely on the agenda for us, but the form in which it'll take, we're still exploring. So more to come on that in the future. Thanks, Janet.
Good. Yeah, coming attractions. Anthony, we've had some questions come through in relation to the Serious Incident Response Scheme as it applies to home services. I might send one of these in your direction. There's a question about the expected timelines for reporting of serious incidents if the incident occurs in the middle of the night or a weekend or a public holiday for home service. Can you respond to that one?
I can, thank you. So reportable incidents, whether they're actual or suspected, that meet the SIRS criteria must be notified to the Commission within the timeframes that are stipulated. And that's stipulated by the priority of the incident. So just as a reminder, for reportable incidents that are classified as priority 1, this must be reported within 24 hours of the provider becoming aware of it. And for reportable incidents that are classified as priority 2, those must be reported within 30 days of the provider becoming aware of it. So the provider must meet its responsibility to notify us within those appropriate timeframes, regardless of whether they first became aware of the reportable incident outside of service delivery hours or indeed outside of office hours.
Okay, useful clarification. Thank you very much. And again, further questions, head them our way. I've had 2 questions come in from participants in this webinar in relation to the star ratings and the contribution of the non-compliance rating to the star rating, and I'll take them in sequence. Joy has asked this question. We still have an open non-compliance notice on My Aged Care, but the issue was resolved. When will this be fixed? That's a fair question. So let me address that. The data relating to the compliance rating is actually updated daily on My Aged Care. So the form and frequency of monitoring that we, the Commission, undertake will depend on the nature of the non-compliance, the level of risk to consumers, and the willingness and assessed capacity of the provider to implement actions to ensure compliance with its responsibilities. So we expect providers to engage in ongoing communications with us about their non-compliance and the steps required to address it, and then the path forward to continued compliance. So in essence, approved providers should, one, proactively provide us, the Commission, with new information and supporting evidence, especially if the non-compliance has been resolved or if there are issues with its resolution, so one or the other. And two, engage with us if you have questions about your regulatory obligations. I hope that's provided some clarity, Joy. It sounds, from my answer, I hope what you see is you have agency here, and please feel free to get in touch with us if you believe the issue's been resolved, and we're happy to talk you through our process and how it will work for both of us. Thank you for asking the question. Now, Joy has come in with a second as well, which I'll go to. And it is, we have had no non-compliance for 3 years, and at our last site audit, we were accredited for 3 years. Why haven't we received a 5-star compliance rating? Now, the answer is that services who have received a 3-year accreditation from their last site audit, B, have had no non-compliance for 3 years, and C, are entitled to A and B are entitled to a 5-star compliance rating, even if that service was issued with a 12-month exceptional circumstances accreditation. Now, I hope that makes sense to you, Joy. So if you have received a 3-year accreditation in your last audit and you have had no compliance for 3 years, then you are entitled to a 5-star compliance rating, even if there was an exceptional circumstances decision in the middle of, subsequent to that accreditation decision. Now, as I said in my earlier remarks, we are aware of a data issue which is impacting the calculation of the compliance ratings in this particular set of circumstances. Not for everyone, but just a subset of providers who have had a particular experience of accreditation. And we're working as urgently as possible to fix that error. Keep an eye on incoming updated advice, which we expect will affect a small subset of providers between now and the publication of the information in the new week. But thank you for raising it, because it does give me an opportunity again to indicate that we are working on a data anomaly that we have discovered which may have affected the ratings for a small subset of providers. Now, I'm conscious of time and I probably need to wrap it up here. Thank you, everyone, for participating as enthusiastically as you have, and thank you particularly for your questions, and also for those of you who stayed the course. For those of you who've been with us through a sequence of webinars, thank you very much. I hope you found today useful, and we definitely appreciate the time you've given us. A big thank you to Lisa and Anthony for their involvement today and the contributions that they made. Now, if you haven't done so already, please complete our feedback survey before you log off, and you click the yellow speech bubble icon at the top of your screen to do so. It'll only take a couple of minutes, and we genuinely look forward to your feedback and your suggestions. There will also be a link to the reform information on our website at that place. And as I mentioned to you earlier, we will send you links to the recording of this webinar if you want to watch it again or share it with friends or colleagues, and also the PowerPoint slides that we used today. And both of those will also be available via our website. In closing, I want to acknowledge what others have also said, in that it has been a big year for everyone in the sector. And I thank you sincerely for all your hard work and your commitment, and that we have seen so amply demonstrated over the last 12 months. I wish you, your staff and those in your care a safe and happy festive season. And we, all of us at the Commission, look forward to engaging with you again early in the new year and across the course of the next 12 months. We have a shared enterprise. We have a shared goal, as Lisa says. And if we can deliver a great consumer experience every time, then that's the objective that we're seeking to achieve. Thank you, everyone, for participating. Enjoy the rest of your day.